Hello and welcome to America in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I am Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square Newswire service. Joining me again today is Casey Harper, the Center Square's Washington, D.C. bureau chief. How are things in the nation's capital, Casey?
Oh, just cheery and bright as ever, Dan.
It has been a week, but we could say that every single week. That would be redundant. But Casey, there was a pretty big development this week when it comes to the U.S. government's debt, with a major credit agency downgrading U.S. government's debt rating. What's going on?
This is not a good story. Yeah, I mean, definitely not cheery or bright, as I quipped. I mean, this is what one expert called a wake-up call. The top credit agency has downgraded the U.S.'s credit rating. The credit rating is like, you could think of it like a credit score for the United States. You might think, why does the United States need a credit score? It's like, well, you have these independent international credit rating agencies that assign credit scores because big banks in other countries, want to know how safe of an investment it is to buy U.S. debt. It can also affect the currency, and basically there are three top credit agencies in the world, and Fitch Ratings is one of them. And they announced this week that they actually downgraded the U.S. credit score from a perfect score of AAA down to the next tier, which is AA+. So I'll read this quote from them. They kind of released a lengthy statement explaining it, but this quote is interesting. The rating downgrade of the U.S. reflects the expected fiscal deterioration, not a good word, over the next 3 years, a high and growing general government debt burden, so high debt, and the erosion of governance related to AA and AAA rated peers over the last 2 decades. That's things like how we don't really pass a real budget and how we always get on the brink of government shutdowns, it seems, every year. That is manifested in repeated debt limit standoffs and last-minute resolutions. So it pointed to, we have a ton of debt. It's rising, which is true. The debt has absolutely exploded over the last couple of decades. People don't realize we basically had just no debt a few decades ago, and certainly no ridiculous deficits like we have now. But the Iraq War and then the 2008 financial crisis sort of set up this trajectory of borrowing, unhindered borrowing, and we continued that through the teens of the 2000s, and then COVID came, and we just felt, Congress, even on both sides, really injected trillions of dollars into the economy to protect it from the COVID era shutdowns that were implemented, and here we are with over $1 trillion deficits. I've written a lot on how serious the debt is, but I'll throw out some scary stats for you, Dan. By the end of 2053, basically in 30 years, the U.S. debt is going to be almost double the size of the entire U.S. economy. That one right there is crazy. Around that same time, interest payments on the national debt will become the biggest expense of the U.S. government. Not Medicare, not Social Security, not national defense, but just interest payments on the national debt. So,
and of course, when you're spending that much money on interest payments, you're unable to spend that money on direct government services, such as healthcare, right, Medicaid, national security, things like that.
Or paying down the debt, right? I mean, so it's a snowball. I mean, anyone who's been in a lot of credit card debt knows what this feels like, and that's exactly where the U.S. is headed, where your interest payments, alone are maybe more than your car payment. You're like, how did I get in this situation? Well, that's where the U.S. is headed, and the politicians on the left and right, and they both do it, can talk about how it's other people's fault, and they can say that there's this and that's, but when it comes down to the numbers and it comes down to other people's money, these credit agencies at a certain point just have to be straightforward and honest about what's going on. So this is a really serious marker. It's I agree from, with the expert that this should be a wake-up call. I'm not entirely optimistic that it will be. I don't know what you think, Dan. Are lawmakers in Congress going to have a road to Damascus moment?
Well, we, of course, at the Center Square have been reporting on the growing debt problem the U.S. faces for years now. Fiscal government watchdogs have been warning Congress and the overall federal government of the growing concerns about out of control spending. So it's not like this is new. That Congress certainly has known, Congress and presidents of both parties have known that we've got a growing debt problem, but no one seems to have the nerve to rein in government spending. It comes down to out of control government spending, and until Congress steps up and said, "Hey, we have to slow spending, we have to cut spending," this problem is only going to get worse. Do I think this is a wake up call that's going to tip Congress? No, there's been, actions from the past are a good indicator of future actions, right? And we've seen no indication that a partisan solution, Republicans and Democrats getting together to curb government spending, to pay down the debt. So I don't think so. But what do you?
Well, Dan, as you know, I'd never disagree with you, especially in public. But no, I'm just joking. But I think you're right. Yeah, I don't have much hope. Maybe I'm cynical. Maybe I'm just around this city too much, and I don't think people are going to change. But it's a true prisoner's dilemma where everyone knows that something needs to happen, but it's in everyone's incentive personally to not be the one to make it happen. And so any lawmaker who steps out and says we need to cut Social Security significantly and cut defense spending and cut all these discretionary programs, they just created 100 campaign ads against themselves from someone who can say this candidate hates the elderly, they hate the poor, they hate healthcare, they hate women, and just run those ads against them and they'll lose. And so I don't know. Warren Buffett made a joke recently I thought was interesting. He said the way to do this is to make it where to pass a law that says all members of Congress are ineligible for re-election if, I think he said something like, if the deficit isn't within tack to GDP or something like that, which, who knows if that'll ever happen, but it illustrates the point that unless all lawmakers somehow are collectively endangered by this, there's no incentive for them to do it. And honestly, I'm not sure the American people want it. I mean, I think Americans know the debt is bad and they want it to be cut in a big picture way, but nobody wants to be the one to have the thing that they care about cut. And so I don't know. It's a scary thing. And of course, nobody wants to raise taxes either. So we're on a bad trajectory with no good end in sight. There's got to be some creative way to change this scenario or it's not going to change.
Well, I guess really the only power we have, and when I say we, voters, me, you, our listeners, is to hold elected officials, particularly Congress and the president, accountable for this. We are about 15 months away from the next, not just presidential election. There is a presidential election in November 2024, but every single member of the U.S. House of Representatives will be on the ballot. About a third of U.S. senators will be on the ballot. I just encourage voters to get informed, and if this is an important issue to you, if this national debt, growing budget deficits, government spending is an important issue to you, as I think it should be. It is to me, certainly. Get informed and let your elected officials know that it's a big, important issue for you. And when it comes to next year's elections, vote on it. Anyway, Casey, we are out of time. Listeners can keep up with this story about growing national debt and more at thecentersquare.com. For Casey Harper, I am Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.